Thank you everyone for joining. I might sit for part of this. So this first talk of the day after the keynote, we're delving into content strategy and specifically landing pages, which I think is a great topic because every project I work on, everyone's like, let's do lots of visual content, let's do lots of storytelling, let's build all these landing pages. And so there's lots to say. Just for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Suzanne Dergacheva. I work at Evolving Web. I'm one of the co-founders along with Alex.
She's also my wife.
Also, yes. And you've heard all about us, so I don't need to introduce too much more, but just to say that I have a lot of background building websites, technical kind of Drupal training, WordPress, and now I get to work more in strategy and discovery with clients and really enjoy that. And like I was saying, everybody wants to tell a story with their website. The number of times I read a brief about a new project and it's talking about storytelling content, it's pretty much 100% of the time. And it makes sense, right? We're looking at trying to create more engagement with users. We're trying to move away from walls of text, the pretty typical driver of redesigning your website. And I think this is obviously a stock photo up here of a bunch of kids watching a teacher tell a story. It is actually really hard to get people's attention and to continue engaging them. And so what we do in terms of like techniques, in terms of web design, is creating things like, okay, we're going to build a lot of components. We're going to build these beautiful building blocks that are going to make up the landing pages, and that's going to allow us to do storytelling. We don't want to just allow content editors to create text and upload maybe one image per page. We really want them to be able to create this more engaging, chunked out, impactful kind of content. And so these are the types of solutions that we come up with as web agencies. We say, okay, we're going to build you a design system. You want storytelling? We're going to create you a library of components, a whole set of building blocks you can use to create your stories. And design systems are created so that you can break down your website into these atomic little pieces, and so that the design is very granular. And then when you put all those pieces together into a beautiful page, that you're going to have a cohesive design. And we do this work all the time. We come up with this beautiful design system. It looks great at this stage because it's all very coherent and balanced. And we have a designer who's carefully picking out, how much text and image, how much text versus visual content is going on every page. There's also the huge benefit that you can take care that every piece is accessible. And so this really is, I think it is a recipe for success. And landing page builders, like if you're using Drupal, you probably have heard of Drupal Canvas. Anyone here? I did a webinar recently on it. I don't know if there's any talks on Canvas today, but this is a little, I have a real video. Awesome. I wonder if my clicker can help me with the video. No. Sorry, once I get the mouse in the right place. So once you have like this dynamic landing page builder, you can take all those pieces that have been beautifully designed and put them together in an extremely flexible way, right? The idea is to break down that barrier of it being arduous to build a page. You don't need to be a developer. You can intuitively drag the layout onto the page and then drag the content into it. And this should really enable storytelling because the person creating the page can tell their story. They can decide the flow of content and the balance of visuals and text. So this is all very exciting. This is where we are right now. I think there's a whole bunch of talks today on design systems and how this all works. But from a content perspective, of course, too much flexibility can lead to pizza. I don't know do people use this word pizza in design? Looks like a pizza. I think it's a Quebecism. I've been living in Quebec a long time now. So it's like when you just throw a bunch of great looking things onto a pizza, it could look like this, right? A bunch of friends get together and decide all the toppings. Same thing with your website. Everyone wants their place on the home page or on your landing pages, and you can easily combine them in a way that's not well designed, even if you're starting out with the most beautiful kind of design elements. You know, we can build these design systems like we do, and you can still end up with a pizza. So what is the secret to success? The secret is to think about why a page looks good to begin with. So a little bit of reflection on pages that you have, if you have an existing design that work well, and that have been designed actually really intentionally, and what makes those good. So I'm going to show you a quick video of a landing page that I think does a great job. You can take a minute to reflect. This is a McMaster engineering website. This is their homepage.
Can you describe it?
Yes. So it's the homepage, and it is starting off. I'll show the video again. It leads with a big hero section that talks about being part of the future of engineering. It has large images, including a mixture of both showing the McMaster students on the McMaster campus, but also doing research in the lab. And so these strong visuals are combined with the messaging. So we don't just assume that people get the message through the images, but we also don't just assume that people read all the text. And there's also an attention to the level of detail at each step. So there'll be some news that kind of backs up the bigger messages. And there is a flow that coherently asks the user to take the next step further down the page. So all of these elements go into planning a landing page like this.
So if you're telling a story and you've got the text, which is great, and the images is wonderful, what about, you mentioned accessibility earlier, so I'm not going to ask. What about the audio description for people like myself who can't see it?
Yeah, so there's a question about the accessibility of the pages and the descriptions. So I can get more into that later, but there's an assumption that if you're using, I'm not going to cover all the technical aspects of accessibility today, but there is an assumption that if you're using a component library, that the individual pieces have been tested for accessibility, meaning you have the right heading level, you have proper semantic content, kind of the basics. The more complicated thing with storytelling and accessibility is making sure that combined, that these aspects still are coherent, so that you still have always a heading structure that makes sense, that you're not skipping heading levels and things like that. So there is some extra challenge, which maybe I can get to later, but mostly we're counting on the pieces having been tested already. So I'm going to walk through 5 types of landing pages today. And the reason I wanted to break this down is because I think it helps us always to have a framework when we're talking about strategy, rather than just thinking, oh, we have to apply strategy to everything and always being hyper aware. It's nice to feel like, okay, we have some big picture guidance, some patterns that we can see that are going to work for all types of websites. So I'm going to walk through different types of landing pages: a why landing page, decision-making landing page, wayfinding landing page, lead generation, and a dashboard. So when we talk about the why landing page, oftentimes this is the home page. but there are certainly other types of landing pages that fall into this category. And they're basically pages that are designed to signal that that the user is in the right place, that they have a sense of connection to the organization, and that they then understand the unique features, the differentiators, the value proposition. And so these types of landing pages tend to be kind of long, so it seems like, why do we have to put so much content just to tell the why? But I do think that some organizations are complex. They have more than one audience, they have more than one kind of project, and so representing all of that through a why landing page is still valuable. So I'll walk through a few examples. So this first example is from Planned Parenthood Direct. It was a website that we developed a few years ago to be the extension of Planned Parenthood, which is a well-known brand. And they got into online services, basically having an app you could use to access sexual health services and products. And so you can it's prompting you to download an app, but the website itself is also there to show you what this service offering is all about and to build trust. And so the landing page is designed to do both things. It's designed to build trust in a brand that's new and unknown, but also to show exactly what the scope of their mandate is. And so it does that through the visuals showing you that there is an app there, that's showing you the type of user that the type of audience that they're trying to attract, and then prompting you right away to download the app. My next example is the ROM, which is right around the corner, right up the street, Royal Ontario Museum. And so this is their homepage. I think a why landing page for a really like a physical space, such as a museum, they kind of have an easy go of it because they have all these amazing visuals, and they have the description of the space, which is kind of an obvious, this is who we are. But the ROM really wanted to, with this project, to kind of turn from just a museum that people think of, oh, I'm going to go to the museum, to really this event-driven strategy of getting people out. Having a lot more visibility of their events and of they have exhibitions, of course, but also their ongoing programs. And so that content takes up a lot of space. It's very prominent on their homepage. And that kind of speaks to the why. So it's not just a simple homepage with, this is our building, but there's a lot of we see a lot of visuals of people interacting with exhibits, and then we see also like a lot of space given to events and programs. This next example is a more complex one for the why, because some organizations are not so clear-cut. You know, you don't always just have a very focused, like, we're trying to get people to download an app or come to our museum. The University of Georgia Center for us was such a project because they came to us and they said, well, we're part of a university, and we work with lots of universities, so great, we understand that. But they said, okay, we're also a hotel, and we also offer youth programs, and all of that is on all these separate sites, but we really just want one central place where people can understand what we do. And so if we look at this website, like, we are sending the vibes of, yes, it is a hotel. You can book a room. It kind of has a design that's it shows you where you would enter the hotel, and it has the little booking information. But the idea is that it's also giving a lot of space equally to finding a course, finding youth programs, events, and making this all available on the first screen, the first above the fold of the website. And then my next example is a more classic higher ed example. So Loyalist College is just down the road in Belleville, and here I wanted to speak to the question of, should I put a big video to answer the question, you know, why should I engage with your organization? Is a video the answer to all these questions? And we see a lot of full-width video on homepages, right? How many of you have a big video on your homepage? Or a carousel? Anyone have a carousel? Kind of trying to achieve a similar thing. And I think I'm playing the video a few times. The video is showing all students. There's people in every single shot. There's probably, it's a 30-second video, I would guess, and there's only like a few seconds per scene. And we're seeing the students do a huge variety of things. And each setting is relatively intimate. Like we see the people taking up a lot of space on the screen makes us feel like, okay, every interaction is kind of given a lot of importance. And this type of video is really building their brand and trying to support their message of the value of small. So the big message across the top of the page is small is collaborative. And so they're trying to communicate that through the video. And I think that when there's a video that's really put on a page like this for that targeted reason of building the brand, not everybody knows about Loyalist. It's not a big college. So if people are considering it, they need to understand that value proposition. So the fact that the video is really trying to directly address that, I think gives it a good case for putting it there. And there was a lot of production effort put into that one video. I think this works better than videos that just kind of show buildings and that take a lot longer to tell the story, because people don't necessarily hover on a video for a long time. And then the other way that we can use video in these types of landing pages is more through the content. So another place on this homepage, where this Loyalist homepage that videos are used, are for their student spotlights. And what I like about it is that even if you don't click on the video, so I'm showing here on the screen a component on the page that says you belong at Loyalist, and there's about 3 or 4, but it's a slider so you can move on to see more, 3 or 4 student spotlights. And you can see that there's a diversity of the students. It's also indicated through the fact that there's different colors for the different play buttons. And then there's a message about what these are meant to mean to you. So even if you're not clicking on the video, you're still getting this sense of there's a lot of different people with different stories who come and study at this school. And so I think that's important for video inclusion, is that even if you're not playing the videos, that at a glance, you can tell what they are communicating. And then the image has a similar role. So I have an example here from the Alberta Municipalities website. And this is a membership-driven organization. So their real thing is they want to attract more members, they want to show the value of membership, and they're using some real images. So one big question we get is, like, a lot of these landing pages that people want to build are very visual, require tons of images to be effective. And should we use stock photography because it looks better, or should we use real images because it's more authentic? And sometimes a combination can work well, because doing a real photo shoot can be quite an undertaking, but having real photos actually really changes the tone of the page. So this particular component combines some stats, particularly about their membership, with photos of actual members. Their membership being like the visuals I'm showing on the page are some firefighters, some perhaps retired members, and then like a meeting of members at a conference. And so it's showing those real images, versus in my next example, I'm showing the entire homepage of this Alberta municipality's website, and there is stock photography mixed in here as well on some of those components that, you know, makes it easier to meet the requirements for images on this page, which are really high. Like I lost count of how many images there are, but there's things like just more ambient images that, you know, fit with the brand but are not custom. So when we're building these types of why landing pages, there's a lot of things to take into account. And so I made a little checklist. So convincing the user of your why before they leave the page. That's one of the main things. You don't need to get into too much detail. You don't need to include a ton of text. But it is great to have content that proves the point and the bigger messages. So content meaning like research items or news items or events that kind of show that you can fulfill the promise of the brand and the bigger messaging. And then if you have brand pillars, like a real brand narrative that you've laid out, just checking that the messaging directly supports that is a good check to do as well. Making sure users know they're in the right place. So the next type of landing page I'm going to talk about are wayfinding landing pages. Wayfinding landing pages to me are those pages that are less about selling a newcomer to your website or a newcomer to your organization. They're designed perhaps for more internal audiences, but people who really need a place, one place where they can go to find all the information. So giving users a single place to find their top tasks and making that page functional. So easy to actually find those 20 links that they were looking for and not spread them all around the whole website. And yet we still want these pages to be engaging. So how do we balance these goals? So I'll give some examples. So my first example is from a website for the US Senator John Ossoff. And this website, it's not a huge website, but it does specifically speak to residents of Georgia. So this is a senator for the state of Georgia, kind of a famous one. John Ossoff is a big, his campaign was certainly in the news. And the services that his office offers are all listed on this one page. So if you are a resident and you want something from John Ossoff, there's one page to go to that presents all that information. And as I'm showing this page, I'll just describe it. So as you scroll down the page, there are some really big components that show the most important interactions you might want to do, the ones that are most popular, including ordering a flag. Apparently that's a big thing that people want their senators to do, is send them a flag. But then there's also other specific things like requesting information about the state of your passport or asking about Medicaid, so things that really relate to people. And then at the bottom of the page, there's a more summarized, condensed version of other types of requests that you might have. So the page is prioritized. It tries to lead you down a certain path, and yet it presents a whole range of options, and it doesn't try to oversimplify. So for wayfinding landing pages, these are good attributes, is knowing your audience, knowing what their priorities are going to be, and then presenting the information in a way that's relatively functional. My next example is another one from McMaster Engineering. So this is a current students landing page. So typically in higher ed, and I think there's quite a few higher ed people here. I don't know if you would raise your hand. A bunch of higher ed people. So current students are one of those audiences in higher ed where really you're selling to the prospective students. So a lot of times websites focus on that audience substantially in the messaging, in what they show in the navigation, in the user journey flows. But there are these other really important audiences that are, I'm already a student, I'm already on campus, and there's lots of information that I need as well. And so having a functional page like this is valuable for that audience. And so just to describe a bit what we see on this page, it's more about grouping together. So the work that's been done is like grouping together the services that the students might need access to into these kind of sections of the page that are large, that feel like they're immersive, they're visual, but they're also relatively functional because we see a set of links. We don't have to scroll forever. There's maybe 3 screens worth. And then that's the prioritized set of links that we think current students will need access to. And there's a few images on the page, but it's not overwhelming. It's not like you have to come up and source a new image every time you want to add a link to this page. So that's important, is making these pages easy to update. And then one last example for this from a website we built for BC Housing. So this is a website built to try, in Toronto we have the same problem, right, where there's not enough housing for people. In BC, of course, they have the same issue. And so this is a website designed to help move projects along. Like, how do you start one of these construction projects? What's the red tape maybe you have to go through? And so it's really a website with a lot of functional pages like this. And one of them here is designed specifically for people who are ready to start their project. So it's not like a general audience kind of page, and it's trying to take you step by step through the process. And so this is another example of something more functional, but what makes it into an engaging landing page is that it is visual, so it lays out the 4 steps, but it puts them into cards. So those are displayed, the 4 steps are displayed as a grid on the page. And then there's also a visual of this blueprint, what you're kind of using, the building blocks you're using. And so it gives you a sense visually of the process. So for these types of wayfinding landing pages, there's a lot of value in prioritizing for these audiences the resources that are most important. There's a lot of value in putting everything into one place. And then validating with that audience, because usually it's a more internal audience. You can ask them, do you have everything you need here? Are we missing something? These pages lend themselves really well to user testing. And then they should be able to be updated easily because they're supposed to be functional. So you shouldn't have to put design work into making an update or adding content. Next, we have decision-making landing pages. So if you think, I'm going to talk at the end about how this all fits into a user journey, but often there's a point at which someone's interacting with your website or interacting with your organization, and they have a decision to make, right? They're deciding, should I buy this product? Should I become a member? Should I submit my application? And so rather than having to have the user go to 5 pages to make that decision, ideally there's one page that has most of the information for most of the users, the target users, all in one place. So I'll take another example from higher ed because it's top of mind for me. If you're applying to, let's say you're applying to U of T and you're applying to a specific program, one of my examples is going to be a program page. It's nice if all the information about the program and the requirements are all in one page. But if you're an international student and you also have some extra considerations, maybe you have one extra page you have to go to. Or maybe if you're a mature student and you're trying to apply some credits you already have, maybe there's another page for that. So you're trying to come up with a page that works for like the majority of the users. And then you also, as a bonus, you also want to give them enough of the why on that page because you can't assume that that person who's comparing that program to a program at another school, for example, you can't assume that they've already come through your homepage and read about your why. So somehow you want the landing page also to hint at what the differentiators are, what the value proposition is. So again, I have some examples. First one from OCAD University, also pretty close by. And this page that I'm showing is the program page for advertising. So if you want to go and study advertising at OCADU, this is the one page that should be telling you the whole story of what that's going to look like, why you should go to OCAD, maybe not another school, and that also gives you enough of the tangible details. So it starts with a big video. OCADU doesn't have a ton of programs, so they've actually created a video for each of these landing pages. They don't have to update the videos all the time, but you know, there is a level of effort there. And then as you scroll down the page, you see a lot of specific program details. So there's a tendency on these types of pages that have to pack so much information in to do a lot of accordions. Here, there are only accordions for what you're going to study in each year. So only if you really want to do that very deep dive of what your four-year program is going to be like, do you have to open up extra information. And that's still on the page. You don't have to reload a new page. There's some like real storytelling going on with a student spotlight, which is nice. And then another thing that I really like about this design is that the call to actions of actually applying and requesting more information, they're always in the same place, and they're always on the right side of the page, and they're sticky. So as you scroll down the page, you still see those calls to action. They're still readily available, and then you also see some key facts about the program, like the what do we see? The name of the program, the degree, the faculty, the duration. So just some key things that are going to help you compare that if you have 5 tabs open and you're comparing a bunch of programs. And what I like about this design is that while it's a landing page and there's storytelling happening, it's not like the person creating this content has to rethink how to tell a story about a program every time. It's relatively templatized. I'm only showing you one example, but every program page follows the same thing. Oh wow, that's nice. Quiet. Okay, my next one. Oh, my next example is also from the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum. So this is one of their exhibit pages. This is also a page where someone might be coming here to decide, do I want to visit this particular exhibit? Is this going to be interesting for me? And in addition to just being able to book your tickets and having a quick description and some images of the exhibit, there is also information there about what activities and events. So going back to like the strategy of the ROM to push their events, that's present on these decision-making landing pages as well. So going back to your pillars of like how are you trying to engage with users and having that be present on these particular pages, I think that's very valuable. And then my last example, because I know we have government people here as well, so this is an example of a page from a municipal website. And it just goes to show like it's sometimes hard, you're in an institutional context, and sometimes your calls to action and your user journeys, they're hard to map out because you're not selling products. So not everybody's selling a program at a university or getting people to come to an exhibit. In this case, the city of Hamilton wants people to apply for their business licenses. So it's a little drier, the content, but they have a lot of pages like this, a lot of content where they're trying to get somebody to take the next step. And so what we have visually, when you scroll down this page, it's a page to apply for a business license. And at the top, there is a little summary section of what that means, and there's a guide. They do rely still a lot on PDFs, unfortunately, but that content is always displayed in a consistent way. And then they have contact information on the bottom that's also part of that template. So although it's, again, a page where there might be a lot of detailed content, they do try to make these templated sections more visual. So that means that when you're creating each page, you don't have to think about bringing in visuals or think about the layout as much. And so you're able to follow a template to try and get users to the next step. So for these types of landing pages, I also have a little checklist here to help show what we're trying to achieve. So making the calls to action really consistent and visual, and making them consistent from one page of this type to the next. So if you're looking at 3 exhibits, they should all look the same to build that familiarity. Telling a mini version of your why story, making it personable, and using a template but adding enough flexibility, which is something you can do on the content management system side. So when a lot of people think of landing pages, they're really thinking of lead generation pages. I know some people are using tools like their CRM to build a landing page. And often that's because lead generation is really the purpose of the page. And so lead generation pages are often created for campaigns, for events. They're really targeted on getting the user to do a specific action. And they're great because you can track them through analytics. You can see how somebody got there. And so it's really the goal is to have a good impression, give enough reasons to engage, but make that engagement pretty frictionless. So often that lead generation page is going to have a form right on it where you can submit your data or where you can really do the next action. And it might be a page that you're linking to from newsletters or from like a social media campaign. And so it might be a page that's seen out of context of the rest of your site. So again, having enough of, creating a good first impression, creating enough of a feeling of the why, although trying to keep it all maybe within one screen. This is the challenge of this type of lead generation page. And so I have an example here from Beneva Insurance. So these are product pages. Oh, and it's in French. You all Canadians speak French, right? So this is a page where you can get a quote about your insurance, right? So this is all about, getting to the next step of filling in that little bit of information about your insurance needs to get a calculation, to get a quote. It's really pure lead capture. And the title at the top of the page is, housing insurance. So it's your home insurance, really standard. And there's a little bit of personalization done. So there is actually the kind of sales rep that you can contact that's customized to your location and kind of the any information that they have about you. They've put a customized sales rep right there on the page. So you see like just a little component that shows the sales rep. And then it's really taking you, although there is a link to a second page, it feels like part of a wizard. It's not like, it doesn't feel like a full page load. It's very fast to click through at the bottom where you're starting to fill out the form. So right on that landing page, you're starting the engagement and giving them the bit of information about you and what kind of insurance you want. So my next example is from higher education. So it's really an important lead generation page for the Rochester Institute of Technology. And their goal is to get you to schedule a tour or an info session. to get you to take a step before before actually submitting your application. So like with a lot of organizations, you know, it's a big decision to decide where to go to university. So they're not expecting every person who comes in to capture that lead through an application. So they've identified this as an important step, like scheduling a tour, signing up for an info session, and so it's letting you do that right from this landing page. And it presents you with a calendar so you can see, you know, when do I want to come visit, or when do I want to show up for the info session. I would say this is kind of a stark one. Like, their brand is pretty minimalistic. So on this page, just to describe it visually, like the Worcester Institute for Technology, it's just their logo, a big slogan, ready to explore RIT, and then the date picker. So they're not doing a lot of storytelling here, but they are fitting it all in one page. And then my last example here for lead generation is like a donation page, another thing that you're going to see a lot in any kind of nonprofit context. And this is one for the giving website for McGill University, where they're asking for some type of donation. They do try to put in some storytelling by having a slogan and an image. So there is some storytelling happening there, and then it's one page that's allowing them to capture users who are coming in from different campaigns. So it's nice because it's very scalable in that way. And so for these pages, you're trying to do some of the work of the why. You're trying to build a good first impression, but you're also trying to get the user quickly along to the next step and make it feel frictionless. So making it fast. The fact that Beneva page, you have to take my word for it, but that form works really quickly, even though it looks like a lot of steps. So making these pages like a great user experience, all in one page. That's what you're going for. And my last type of landing page is a dashboard landing page. So, you know, I've talked a lot about landing pages that are really marketing based. You know, we're trying to capture people's attention. We're trying to get them to the next step in the user journey. But a lot of the websites that we're building are also very, they should be very data rich also. They should give a lot of information. They should be informative to the user, and they should help the user delve into that content efficiently. And so we're also thinking about how to design these types of experiences and how to wrap them in a storytelling context. So our goal with like a dashboard landing page is often to summarize complex information and allow users to dig deeper. And so I think of them as landing pages because they are also there to communicate the messaging. They're there to tell the story, as well as at the same time getting the user to their top task. This example is for ASOMA. ASOMA is a repository of Indigenous knowledge. And so they actually have this search where you can find community submitted, but also kind of centrally created items related to that, to culture, to different themes like health and wellness and storytelling and things like this. So a lot of cultural knowledge all in one place. And so the way that this page gets at that and really shows the value of this repository of knowledge is through the types of filters they've chosen and through the fact that they do have images for their search results. So a page like this, like, it's about helping the user find the information, but even if you don't do a search and you just come to this page to see like what is in this repository, the fact that it makes that first impression and gives you that glimpse and that taste for it, I think is very valuable. Planned Parenthood Direct has a page that summarizes all of their services. So they have a map, and so they show you at a glance where their services are available, and then you can dig into and start searching for the services available in your state. So again, it's a landing page. It helps get you right to the information you need, dig into their database of services. But at a glance, you can kind of see the range and the scope and overall what it's giving you. And so the visual here is the map, which is a common landing page element. And so for these types of dashboards, you know, reflecting the the content that you have, but allowing people to see at a glance what's available without even clicking. And often these types of dashboards are going to include search or filtered content, giving a way for the users to dive deeper, to see the most relevant filters that they actually can that they can actually understand, not having those filters be too technical. Those are really valuable aspects of a page like this. And then aggregating the content so that the page runs itself. Like if you have this cool looking map, but someone has to manually come in and update it, that's not the best in terms of your governance. So thinking through that as well. So it's great to build beautiful building blocks. It's nice to have a strategy for combining them into some landing pages that are coherent. So those are great design tasks and strategy tasks that you can work on. But they're really only valuable, these landing pages, if they fit into a user journey that makes sense. So coming up, like I picked 5 because it's a great number for a presentation. There's 5 types of landing pages. But you should take this information back and think, well, what are the types of landing pages that we actually need? And what should we be focusing on? And which ones require a lot of customization versus which one can be more templated? Like, our programs, we have a ton of them, but they're important. We should create a template. These other types of pages should be more bespoke, but we should focus on which ones do we even need. And so stepping back from individual landing pages, it's really valuable if you haven't done this as part of a discovery process or a content strategy process, to think through the user journeys that you have on your website and to map this out. So I have a couple examples here. First one, because we have a lot of higher ed folks in the room, for prospective students. So thinking through what is the journey of those students considering what university to attend, right? So you can map out the steps. That's a pretty standard UX technique. Discovery, research, they apply, hopefully they accept, they make that decision, and then they start orientation. But then beyond that, what you're thinking of from a landing page strategy perspective is, what are the key points on that journey that you can really distinguish yourselves on? So if you're a university, what's the value proposition? And then along that journey, how do you communicate that value proposition? So for example, if you are a small college within a big university, that's a value proposition that you can hone in on and say, okay, that has to be obvious at the start of the user journey. Or if you're going to offer co-op programs, maybe that's something that's valuable midway, where you really want to be communicating, well, you're considering 3 universities, but here's why this one's really different, and bringing in that personal student perspective. So thinking about what are those, literally what are the pieces of content or the stories or the ways that you can lay out the messaging, and at what point on the user journey do you need to make that clear, and where is it like an opportunity that lets you distinguish yourselves from all your competitors. And then thinking about how landing pages can support that. So does that mean, I'm thinking of OCAD University. One of their big things is you have to submit a portfolio when you apply. So they have a drop-off of people who have trouble putting together a portfolio. They're high school students and they don't really know where to start. And so making sure you've identified that and maybe creating a landing page for it, or having a lead gen to get people into an info session about it. Those types of opportunities are what you can plan out and map on top of your user journey map. And then just another example, nonprofit. So obviously if you're doing a fundraising campaign, you need to get your donors in, and you have also a user journey map. starting with awareness of your organization. Somebody considering deciding where they're going to donate, making that donation decision, and then maybe staying on and becoming a recurring donor and even an advocate. So these are all steps on a typical user journey. And then identifying those touch points where you can differentiate. So for example, I think I gave money to Oxfam not too long ago, and I was specifically convinced by research that they had done with women who were breastfeeding, and I was like, oh wow, that really resonates with me. I see this research and I want to donate. And so like identifying those points where, not every nonprofit highlights research in their communications, but that's maybe somewhere where Oxfam stands out. So identifying the touch points and then getting it across through your landing page strategy. And so some big takeaways, because I presented a lot of ideas, a lot of things like, go back and redo all your landing pages, a lot of work. So what can you go back and do starting on Monday? That might be different than what you're doing now. So first, just being aware. Creating landing pages does require some design thinking. So hopefully not a designer. That should kind of be the standard. Like, you shouldn't have to have a designer involved every time you create a landing page. That's the point of having a content management system and having a framework for creating pages, having well-designed building blocks. But it does require a mindset of, how does this look? How does this come across to the user, both on the visual side, the messaging, and the user experience? And then looking out for filler pages that just add clicks, because a lot of landing pages are created, but they're just kind of entryways to the next landing page. So looking at them in the context of the bigger experience and making sure that they actually are moving the user along the user journey, and maybe that they play one of these roles that I've identified or that you've identified as a reason to have a landing page. Because taking out the non-essential landing pages on your website can really help you clean up some cruft, have fewer pages to maintain. And then documenting the best of each landing page. So you might know already on your website, well, there's 3 landing pages that we put so much effort into and they really work well, but maybe not everybody knows about those. So if someone goes to create a new one, they're just thinking they're coming up with all their ideas from scratch, but having those best practices as templates, or just as, linking to here. If you want to create a landing page for this, this is the best practice. This is an example of what you should start with. So I know people love having those best practice examples around. And so hopefully that gave you lots of ideas. And we do have a bit of time for Q&A, so I'm excited to hear if you have other types of landing pages you're thinking about, if you have questions about how to implement a strategy like this, or more questions about accessibility aspects of this, I would love to hear. And if you don't have time to ask your question, I will put my email address up here too. Yes?
Suzanne, thank you. More than ever before these days, when designing landing pages, we have to think about whether somebody's using one of these or what we used to consider a computer.
Anyone's using a phone, for those watching the recording.
So I noticed some of the examples, some of the designs you showed both what it would look like in a vertical, smaller format and what it would look like on a traditional wide display. I'm curious if you come across any examples of times where you wanted the mobile experience to actually be different in some ways than the desktop experience, not just a responsive version of each other. For example, with universities, I've seen examples where a university website, when you're looking at it on a computer, might focus more on how to come here and apply, or how to donate money as an alumni. Whereas if you're walking around with your phone, it might focus on the campus map to find a building.
Okay, that's a great question. So it's about if there's actually different strategies or things you want people to do, whether they're coming from mobile or they're viewing your website more on a desktop. Personally, I don't like the idea of having a really different experience, because you have a lot of users who will do both, right? They'll start off they'll be thinking about what, should I donate my money to Oxfam on their subway ride home? And then maybe they'll actually do the donation step when they're in front of their laptop. Or certainly for something like applying to university, you might actually open up the laptop for that one, right? Like you might get to that next step that's further along, wanting to open up the thing and research more deeply. So to create a really different user experience versus just having different levels of like, maybe simplifying the visuals more on mobile, I wouldn't recommend that. I would be curious if there's like research of people who have done that and then tested how it works, but. Yes.
Hi, so you spoke a lot about using visuals to engage visitors. And yeah, visuals are probably the most effective tool we have. So we have a bunch of websites, and whenever we're redesigning, the comment we get back is, it's boring. I want more visuals on here. So we make them, a content type. So we make them a content type with an image field. We design the pages so there is. So we give them the ability for them to add images because they can say, I want to add, or just add to my page. I can do it right now. And also as an extra, we make these default images that are kind of boring to kind of hopefully inspire the person adding the content to actually replace the default image. But oftentimes we end up that the content editors don't replace these default images, so you just end up with a lot of these default images. I'm just wondering, are there other things we can be doing, I guess, in terms of trying to get content editors to put up their own images?
This is a perennial problem. So it's about having a design that relies on images. People say they want more visual content, but then when it actually comes down to creating the content, sourcing those images is a lot of work. And if you provide defaults, then people might just say, oh, well, great, I don't need to upload an image, I have this default looking thing. And I know if you look at the Evolving Web blog, we've got a lot of those default ones because it's like, we just want to publish the blog post and we don't know what to use for the URL, so we'll just put in. But, creating boring ones so that the content editors are inspired, I don't know about that approach because, inevitably you do want the default to be something publishable. But just in general, I think it's possible to create pages that have a sense of visual without requiring the content itself to have a customized visual that's been thought through, like what am I going to create for this piece of content. I think that's something you have to think through in terms of the governance of we want to reduce friction for creating these types of content. So maybe we have no image required or fewer images. Maybe there's one image that can be used in more places, rather than having to, let's say if you have to publish a program page, having one image required for the program is fine. But if someone has to also upload a version for thumbnail or a version for socials, then that's adding to their work. So kind of reducing the number of visuals required to be essential. And then also thinking through is there a formula for creating those images that you can give to people? So I had the example of the student spotlights. And it can be hard then to add new spotlights because you want all the images to look so consistent and look nice if they're displayed all on a grid together. So if you make creating those images in the first place kind of easier, say, you just have to take the student out to this place and take it on your phone, and that's going to be the right size and that's going to be the right quality, and maybe put them in one of the t-shirts that we have that fits the brand, and that's the branded image. You're kind of reducing that level of effort to create the content in the first place.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. So just based on that conversation of using more and more visuals, there's always that big tension, right? Because you have people who may have difficulty interpreting those visuals, or maybe sometimes there's so much visuals, so many visuals, that the person gets distracted from the actual purpose of what the website is about. And so I'd be curious to hear from you, how do you balance, how do you kind of like work with that tension? How do you know when enough is enough versus, this looks nice, you should put it there?
Yeah, so great question about how do you balance the images, and sometimes is there a tendency to add too many images? Certainly having a video that's playing constantly can be a distraction. And I've seen it in offices where the homepage of the website is the default kind of like thing that pops up on your screen, and then everybody's just watching this video all the time, and it's very distracting. And so I think that's where just having a design system that's just helping you design the individual components isn't enough. You want to also have guidance around like what's the balance of, like specifically what are the best practices for balancing the visuals and the text on the page, but also making sure that the text alone speaks for itself. So often this comes through a little bit because now obviously we're designing for mobile from the start, and on mobile, although we still use images, we're often not able to show like the big version of an image, and we're sometimes stripping the images out. And so I think that brings a lot of clarity if we use the review of mobile designs kind of like as a filter for that, to say like, okay, let's make sure that the story still works without the visuals being so immersive. That's helpful. And then also just like literal guidelines around not having too much density of images. And it's not just the density of images. Often another thing that comes across as kind of overwhelming is the saturation. So sometimes we design one component that looks, everyone loves it, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to use this one kind of component. Like, let's say it's called a featured image, but it's got some text with it. But like, we'll just use that for the whole page. We'll just stack 20 of these featured images one on top of the other. So specifically having guidelines steering people away from that and towards more like a balance of getting the messaging through in a more functional way. I think that's part of it. It's hard to get people to read documentation, which is why having examples is so useful. Yeah, and we're at time. Oh, we're 2 minutes late. Maya got us early and I put us back on schedule. But thank you, everyone. And if you have more questions, come talk to me, email me, and come grab a coffee and we'll chat the rest of the day.